and Twitter. Tonight we are very happy to have with us Miss Nina Romano and part one of her Wayfarer trilogy, The Secret Language of Women, something I've always wanted to learn. Nina Romano earned her MA from Adelphi University and MFA in Creative Writing from FIU. She's a world traveler and lover of history. She lived in Rome for 20 years and is fluent in Italian and Spanish. She authored a short story collection, The Other Side of the Gates, 4 poetry collections, and 2 poetry chapbooks. Romano has been nominated twice for the prestigious Pushcart Prize. Please give her a nice warm Books and Books welcome, Miss Nina Romano.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? First, I want to say thank you, Steve, and thank you, Mitchell Kaplan, for having me. And thank you all for coming. I know it was a trek from the Keys, and I really appreciate that. Family and friends, and new friends. First, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about how I wrote the book, and then just do a little bit of reading. I don't want to bore you out of your minds, and you'll read the book with your own voices in your head, I hope. W. Somerset Maugham, I'm repeating myself, I said this at the Miami Book Fair, but W. Somerset Maugham said, "There are 3 rules to writing a novel. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are." I think perhaps the first one is to listen. Because as a little girl, I did a lot of practicing and listening to my grandmother and my aunts and my mother talk around the kitchen table, drinking coffee, and my grandpa, who was a very interesting guy, talk about his recollections in China. And they beguiled me, these tales, because they were so foreign, and it sounded to me like something wonderful, to travel. I remember a nun once asking me, "What do you want to do for your life?" And I said, "Travel." And she meant, like, for your life's work, be a nun, be a nurse. And that wasn't happening to me because I heard too much about Italy, etc. So my grandpa was in the Italian Navy. He was a sailor from Sicily, and I saw his passport and his handsome picture, and he had a big mustache, and he was very good looking, and he was tall for a Sicilian and well built. He reminisced about China and talked about the beautiful landscape, diminutive Oriental women with hair the color of jet, and other European navies and ships. And he also told us that he got into quite a few fisticuffs with the French Navy sailors, and not just the boxers. This was all alluring and exotic to me, and I didn't know that it was going to have a payoff one day and that I was going to try and write about my grandfather. He talked about many different things: gods, tattoos, dragons, statues of Buddha, temples, the tea ceremony, calligraphy, karma, and acupuncture. He spoke of Sicily and his travels into China, and he was stationed also in Shanghai, and he traveled many of the waterways in China. So I had a wealth of knowledge, and of course, I began to picture what it could be like to be a young sailor, handsome and away from Sicily, fighting the boxers. So I began to write the story in third person, his point of view, and I did a lot of research about ships because I figured I'm going to have to know this. And I found myself struggling quite a bit. And I had a short story that was set in the 70s in China, and I thought possibly I could use some of this. And what happened, my girlfriend, Mary Ann Haycock, who is an artist and also a scribbling woman, a poet and a journal writer, said, let's go to the Iowa workshop for a summer program in 2000. This was 2004. She said, you can take a revision course. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because I haven't even written the novel yet, but that would be fun. And so here it presented me an opportunity to write something. And you had to bring in 20 pages. And I wasn't going to, no way in hell, write what I had already, and bring in something that I already had written. This was a perfect opportunity. And so I wrote 22 pages, and it flowed very naturally in the point of view of a first-person point of view of a woman, a fictitious woman, a bilingual woman, whom my fictional character, loosely my grandpa, based on my grandpa, would fall in love with. For the workshop, I assigned the name Giacomo to my male character. That is not my grandpa's name. His name was Stefano. And for the woman, I named her Lian. And basically that means lotus in Chinese. And I had found my protagonist and my female perspective. I was very, very thrilled at this because I was floundering. I decided to alternate the chapters, having one his, one hers, and that way it would force me to explore things that I have never done before, and such difficult things for me as abandonment, abortion, and rape. I am Catholic, and abortion, putting myself in the shoes of a woman who wanted or needed or thought she must have an abortion, is a tremendous thing. So I basically challenged myself in many scenes of this book. Let's see, I am a poet, so I love lyrical writing. I can't help it. I love poetry, and this comes out in all of my work, and I actually have to control myself because I can do some purple prose and get off the track. So I have to be careful with that. I was very fortunate in that I have a husband who loves to travel and who took me, Felipe, thank you very much, to China twice to visit. And in China, naturally, we went to Beijing, which was formerly Peking, and held the Tiananmen Square, which many of you probably know about, and the Forbidden City. And I became enthralled with a city called Guilin. Guilin is a painter's paradise and is surrounded by magnificent mauve hills and cliffs, many waterways and markets. I became totally spellbound by China's history, culture, superstitions, art, cuisine, medicine, Nushu, the secret language of women, now extinct, like the binding of females' feet. If you saw my library in my office, you would understand what kind of research I did, because I have many, many, many books on many, many subjects related to what I wrote about. And what happens is, if you love history and you love research, you can get stuck in the research. And a lot of times I did. I got stuck and I had to move on. And a writer must write. So I had to leave the research and get into the writing. So later, when I came back from China, I culled all of this information, my many, many notes, and returning from Asia, I began a romantic story, because there's nothing in the world like love. It is the thing that I think the most important thing that we have, love and family. And from there, I wrote a first draft, The Secret Language of Women, and I sketched backstory, themes, motifs. I'm going to go through a whole list of things here. Metaphors, settings, dialogue, obligatory scenes, character motivation, conflict, cause and effect, climax resolution, and denouement. The plot developed and germinated out of the story as I was writing it, and this was exhilarating, because the creative part, you can throw down anything you want in a first draft, and basically that's what you should do. What comes later is the cerebral part, and that is the revision. And I revised this novel numerous times. To be truthful, 9 complete times. Each time I revised for a different thing. Structure, layout, format, point of view, language. I had to curtail some of my very, very lyrical language. Plot, which is not always easy for me. Exposition that it told and did not show. Scenes comprised of action, dialogue, and the use of the 5 senses. This I learned from John Dufresne, my professor at FIU, who was my advisor and a mentor, and is still writing blurbs for me, thank God. So with the Boxer Rebellion as a backdrop, The Secret Language of Women is the first book in the Wayfarer trilogy. Book 2 will be out in February, and Book 3 in America will be out in July. Book 2 is Lemon Blossoms. It is set in Sicily, completely different than the Chinese background for this one. And in America is in America. So this is the story of star-crossed lovers, Leanne, a Eurasian healer, and Giacomo, a sailor in the Italian Navy. It is a haunting, epic tale of love, found, lost, and desperately searched for at all costs and consequences. And I hope you will enjoy my little reading. You all can hear me in the back. I mean, I have a phys ed voice, so you should be able to. That's my original background. Okay. The Secret Language of Women. Prologue. The things that test you and are vanquished bring everlasting joy. The differences between traditional written Chinese and Nushu, the secret language of women, made it difficult for me to learn. My mother and grandmother could not write Chinese and learned Nushu when they were young and wanted me to grasp it too. I cannot say they harped on me or were tyrannical, but I will say they were insistent, and for this I am eternally indebted. My mother said it challenged me because I wrote like a man and didn't have to rely solely on Nushu, the way they did to communicate with other women. The ideograms of Chinese correspond to a word or part of a word, whereas each of the 700 characters of Nushu represent a syllable. Women's language is phonetic. In Chengguan dialect, adaptable and pliant for singing, poetry, writing, and with such delicate strokes, they appear as lines of feathers. Though learning was problematical, I mastered it. Like I do all things I set my mind to conquer. At the time, I resented the study of it, yet I knew innately one day I would be grateful to possess the knowledge and skill of the secret language, which would offer me strength and solace for a lifetime. And although I was writing in Nushu, for some reason, I signed with a flourish in Chinese, Wo Lian, I am Lian. Chapter 1, Angelica. Peking, Yehuan, the Summer Palace, 1895. Nothing happens by accident. I finished assisting my father in a successful operation, and while washing my hands, realized how much I loved the art of healing and desired nothing more than to practice it. My father, Gianluca Brasolin, a Swiss doctor, proficient in both Western and Eastern medicine, kept an inexpensive garret southwest of Tiananmen Square in the 8th alleyway of the Dashilian area of Zhuangwu district in southern Peking. This was the capital's garish and tawdry red light district, but father chose it because he could do the most good there. The surgery took place in a King Lu, a brothel built some decades prior to and that adjoined our humble residence. Its decorated brick eaves touching ours. My Baba, as I called him when not referring to him as doctor in front of patients, saved a 13-year-old girl from dying of a self-induced abortion. But she will never have babies. He stopped her from bleeding to death by administering a hypodermic injection of snake poison to staunch the hemorrhage. Fluent in both Mandarin and Italian, my father had been called to work as a doctor for the Italian consulate. We had been in China's capital city of Peking for 6 months, but soon would return to our home in Guilin, where my mother's mother resided. Baba was bored with dignitaries and the artifice of court life, and suffered from a heart that was weak and failing. Even more than these things, he was frightened by the brewing animosity toward foreigners and growing political strife that had seized parts of the country, especially in the north. Peasants known as Boxers sought to drive all foreigners from China, my Baba included. They belonged to a secret society known as Iyo Ho Chuan, righteous and harmonious fists, in North China, but spreading. They practiced boxing and calisthenics, which they believed would give them supernatural powers and make them impervious to bullets. In the south, the situation was calmer, and Father said we would be safe there. I, however, feared the return to Guilin because I knew my grandmother, Waipo, had arranged a marriage that would take place almost immediately. Lu was a simple man, a farmer, whom she felt confident would provide for me. Now what happens is, I'm going to speak a little bit about it instead of reading it all. Court couriers come to their residence, and Dr. Brassolin and his daughter are summoned to the palace. When they get to the palace, of course, he has to visit with the Italian ambassador. And at first, he thinks it's just something, maybe eating too much or drinking too much or whatever, and then realizes that it is typhus. They are called before Qiji, who was the Empress Dowager, and they speak with her. And for some reason, she also wants to speak to Lian. And Lian is a little bit bold and brazen, but she tries her best, doing the kowtow, etc. After a while, they speak seriously with the Empress, and then they are escorted by a eunuch to wait. Outside, the eunuch was waiting to escort us to our carriage. His scent made me slow my step, and my father's words came back to me how these castrati often conceal their body odors with perfume. We followed him to a huge red portal where my father ordered me to stop. The eunuch, leading the way, turned, walked a courteous distance ahead, and stopped also. How attuned he was to every human situation. Baba joined him and conferred briefly. Then he returned to me. Your behavior was atrocious, but it's my fault for never having given you proper instruction. I wanted to tell him about the sailor who had winked at me, but his fury was unleashed and I dared not. He said, with all you have read, I thought you'd know. Our woe isn't over yet. He blew out a huge breath of air. You'll be escorted to a garden to wait for me. The eunuch will take you. I have to make sure the ambassador will be fully cared for and that the proper precautions are followed so the disease does not spread. The Empress has demanded that he be removed immediately from the palace and is having him transported back to the Italian legation. She has made it clear she will not suffer any repercussions or scandal from this ordeal. She detests foreign devils, me included. His anger softened, and he gave me a small smile, although she's curious as to why a Chinese woman married me. Try to behave like a lady and don't speak to anyone for any reason. I nodded. Following the eunuch, we walked along for what seemed like a li, passing through what I dubbed the Hall of Dragons, for I saw many etched or painted everywhere. If the Empress hates us so much, I said to my Baba, why did she bring you here? Obvious, isn't it? I make myself understood to all parties concerned, and am a doctor who understands medicine of two worlds. I mouthed the words, European and Asian. But there's something more, correct? I tried to keep in step with his long stride. The Empress Dowager cannot afford culpability if something happened under the auspices of the court. Typhus can spread in unexpected ways. There are many lives at stake here. He gave me a meaningful look, including Chinese. The eunuch led us to a small garden where a fountain emptied into a small pool. Father bowed to me. As I returned his bow, he left me. The eunuch indicated a black lacquer bench where I sat down. Much cooler here, the eunuch said. I will bring tea. He asked me if I required anything else. I wanted to say, yes, a pallet to sleep on, and may I dunk my feet into the pool. But I held my tongue, adhering to Father's admonition. As he disappeared through a gate in the wall, I stood and wandered to the fountain. I sat down on the edge, away from the splashing water, and began to trail my hand in between lotus leaves. The garden smelled of jasmine. I took a deep breath and decided that the Empress wasn't really all that much. Wouldn't a goddess be more like Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy my mother had taught me to revere? Aiding the sick, now that was meaningful life, and exciting because so many things could go wrong that you didn't bargain for, no matter how carefully you tried. There was nothing in the world like the intricacies of the human heart, mind, body, and soul. This I had been taught by my father, and this I believed. The carp frolicked in the light of flickering lanterns. Hungry little fishies? Me too. A servant appeared, set before me a tray of tea and some deep-fried bean curd with a light soy sauce. Bowed and left, backing up as if I were royalty. At his gesture, I smiled, but that faded fast. One of the honor guard sailors appeared in the alcove and beckoned me. Not only was I astonished to see a man here, but this particular man, with the large brown eyes, was the very one who'd winked at me. Ah, for certain, this was the hour of the impulsive rat. He called to me in Italian in a soft, strong voice. Had he followed me here? How did he know I understood him? He must have overheard me talking to Father. I stood, a little shaky on my feet. He was a god, tall past the lowest willow branch that canopied the space between us, so handsome in a European way, like my father, and his smile illuminated his face. Round eyes the size of chestnuts held mirth and youth. I stopped quaking and began to walk with a steady gait. I never once looked down. His gaze held me until I stood in front of him, looking up into his smooth-cheeked face. He no longer smiled. A cloud covered the sickle of moon. His serious expression conveyed a question, but I couldn't fathom the meaning, and then he spoke, saying, "Sei la più bella ragazza che ho visto mai." The way he said that I was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen sounded to my ears like music from a piper, and I wanted to follow him anywhere. This man, who saw past my ungainly big feet and ugliness straight to the center of my soul. Though how could I believe him, a much-traveled sailor? He stood at parade rest. An expression Father had told me was a more relaxed one than that of attention. Though it looked rigid to me, I moved closer. Nothing of his body shifted, and he held a bayonet rifle in front of him. Only his eyes moved. They simply made me step into the space that embraced him as he leaned down and placed his warm, soft mouth upon mine. A kiss I'd only dreamed of until now. I thought I would faint from terror and pleasure. My mind begged permanence, but how could it when that was wholly irrational? When he pulled his lips away and straightened, I inhaled deeply of his sandalwood cologne and tobacco. He whispered, "Non dimenticarmi mai." I repeated like a child, learning a lesson by rote. My et poi mai. He flipped his rifle on his shoulder, saluted, and at the sound of his footfalls on the parquet floor, did an about-face. As he walked away, I wondered if I'd ever learn his name. I touched my lips, again murmuring in Mandarin, never, never will I forget. Thank you. This was lovely. And you are lovely, and I thank you for coming again. Does anybody have any questions about the writing of the book or the POV or anything you want to ask? Please ask me. Feel free. The writer's husband? This is his new expression. Ricky.
I came in late, so I'm hoping you didn't already say this, but the first seed of the thought, the first day, the first concept when this began to grow in your head, before you had characters or setting or anything, the first concept of the main idea. Can you share that with us?
I'd love to. That is. I wrote a short story for John Dufresne, and it was part of my master's thesis. The story took place in China in 1970s. And I thought, I can use some of this. I really liked the name of the character, and some of the things that were happening to her in the story. And so I have noted that many of my novels are germinated or have their germination in a short story or a poem. I think I said at the book fair, narrative poem, if you just water it, it will grow into a novel. Well, I think that narrative poetry for me is a wonderful thing I'm blessed with, okay? I can write poetry, and it doesn't kill me if anybody criticizes it, and off we go. But short stories, yeah, fiction, yeah, okay. I have to really pay attention. And when somebody tells me to cut something, I balk. I can add anything, but boy, if I have to cut. So then there was the beginning. The first chapter was not my first chapter. I didn't come till later, after I think I had written the entire first draft and also probably revised it 1 or 2 times. And then that came to me. I knew that my character had to have met Qiji, the Empress Dowager, because it was in the time of the Boxer Rebellion. And also, I had another character in the book, Guojid, who is Father Alberico, and he really was a live character, a personage, that lived in Italy and was a priest in a mission in China. So I had some things that were cooking, and then you didn't hear it, but my grandfather was a Sicilian, and he was in the Italian Navy, a sailor, and I learned a great deal of things that I sparked my interest in China and Asia, the Orient. It was something I knew I wanted to do, travel and write.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I love questions. That's it. That's it. Enjoy the wine. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just not a question, a comment. I love the name Giacomo. It's mellifluous and musical and exotic, just like he probably was.
My grandfather's name was Stefano. Giacomo was actually a name I stole from my uncle. My Uncle Jack's name was Giacomo, and I love it. I've always liked it. And Leanne was just, I wanted something short. When I was in China, I met somebody whose name, a tour guide, Leanne, and so I asked her what it meant, and she said Lotus, and I loved it, and it was short and wonderful, and I said, that's a keeper. Okay. Yes?
What are you working on now?
Ah, thank you for asking. Oh, my heavens. I just finished correcting for the 3rd time Lemon Blossoms, which is the 2nd novel of the trilogy, the Wayfarer trilogy, which is being published by Turner Publishing in February of next year. And I just sent off all of the corrections, and this has been corrected several times. All of the corrections I sent to my editor this evening, and I said, don't get back to me because I will. I'm going to be enjoying the weekend reading and partying with my little Isabella, and I'll get you on Monday. In the meantime, I had just finished the last revision of In America. This book and Lemon Blossoms took time. I had years to write these books and years to revise them. In America, I was given 1 year. And let me tell you, to write a novel in a year, my deepest respect to all these authors who push them out one after another. It's fantastic because, let me tell you, it is very difficult. And of course, you don't have the time to revise and revise and revise. So I made a plan for myself, 50 pages a month until I get it written, and I did. In 6-7 months, I had a miserable first draft, and that I sent to my writing group, and they critiqued it for me. And then after that, I was able to come back to Florida in the summer and revise. They wanted to take out many, many pages, and they basically wanted me to rewrite a book that wasn't mine. And I said, no, I'll leave it in until somebody from Turner tells me, get it out. So I sent this revision to the woman the acquiring editor who accepted me at Turner, and she was very lovely, and she gave me 4 points, only 4, that she thought that I should look into. It was great to have these 4 points. Plus, she handed it to an intern, and the intern was a little bit more in-depth and went through and then sent me a copy online, which had tracking. So I could accept, delete, take, whatever. So that worked very well. So after that revision with the acquiring editor's comments and the intern, I sent it to 2 very dear friends. And they are very, 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 very wonderful in critiquing. Mona Birch, and from FIU, she's a graduate of FIU, she's a teacher, and Rosalie Muscat, who worked for TriStar, and she was in the film industry and is terrific, just terrific. So with these critiques, I rewrote it again, and then I handed it to Jane Brownlee. Jane, are you listening? And she read it, and the 2 of us went through our comments together, and I rewrote it one more time and sent it in. That's what I've been working on. Thanks for asking. Anything else? Yes?
If we wanted to purchase, I see one book. Is there more?
At the desk.
Okay.
Steve will be happy to help
you
you.
can sign
Do I
off
have
there?
to? Cut? Okay, yeah, if anybody else has anything else to ask. My husband has a question. When are you going to write the next book? He said I can only have a little time off. Yeah.
Did you do a lot of reading of Chinese literature in translation?
Of course.
In terms of the cadence and whatnot?
Of course. Not just Amy Tan, Lisa C., Angie Min, I mean, a million of them, of course, going way back. I mean, to some of the older literature. And then I had books that I didn't read completely, but I would read passages or just see how they were doing with their dialogue or whatever. And so I have several of those. I would probably love to finish reading some of those, but I didn't have the time. And I love historical novels, so I did a lot of reading of historical novels. And a lot of them were set in World War II, of all things. But hey, that's the way that went. And so I think it all goes into the writing. You know that for yourself. Leonard is a wonderful writer. Leonard Nash, and I thank you for coming. And he is not only a short story writer, but he is an editor, a wonderful editor. And he edited a lot of my short stories when I was in grad school. And I have him to thank. Thank you very much. You'd like to get hold of this, I bet, huh? No. Okay, anybody else? Let's drink some wine. Let's have some cheese. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Folks, if you're watching online, give us a call. You still have time to get a book autographed for shipment to your home. For those of you here, the books are going to be for sale behind the counter out there. Ms. Romano will sign them for you right over here. Let's give another round of applause. That was a great reading. Thank you so much. Bye.